Why should we break up silos? I've been doing this for years. You're telling me I don't know what I'm doing? Or, geez, this is a new rule. I don't know if I'm comfortable with that. It's people thinking through how to move forward that is the really hard thing. And for sure, we're going to need expertise. Absolutely. Coaching, however, is different. It's not about the knowledge. So we need both. All right, so think of who you would reach out to. And that's why the beginning of this is that coaching is more about who you are than what you do. So let's look at what that is. Here we have supportive behaviors. I'll tell you what they are in a moment, and diminishing behaviors. There are things that you do when you're interacting with people that support them in their thinking and support them as a person. Then there are things that we do that are diminishing. They take away from that interaction. Interrupting, I don't think you should do that. I don't think that's a good idea. I wouldn't do that. Discouraging, criticizing, that really didn't work out too well. I think you can do better, right? These are all diminishing behaviors. These are things that have really nothing to do with coaching techniques or coaching skills. There are things that we do in our everyday lives when we're interacting with people. And again, you can think of the different kinds of people that you enjoy interacting with. Now, please don't take this personally. I'm not saying that if you discourage people or criticize people or interrupting, there's anything wrong with you. We're all human. We all do it. Coaching, however, the main part of coaching has nothing to do with coaching techniques. And in this case, I'm talking about pure coaching. I don't mean being an Agile coach. Agile coach will give expertise and teaching and all of that stuff. So what a coach needs to do to be a coach is they need to increase their supportive behaviors from wherever they are, as far to the right as you can go, and reduce your diminishing behaviors. And that takes work and practice and actually training on what these things are and how to do them. So ideally, all you have is supportive behaviors and no diminishing behaviors. That's really hard to do. I wish I could say that I'm perfect, but I'm certainly not. I'm working on these things all the time. And it's not so much that the urge goes away, it's that we learn how to suppress it. And then we also add some coaching techniques, for sure. Like powerful questions is a coaching technique. That's something that we would add on. So let's look at what some of these supportive behaviors are. And I think you'll see, you might think, I didn't know that that's what coaching was, but they are. So for instance, rapport building, presence, focusing on the other person. You might think, okay, I've heard of those. But my question is, where are you on that scale of rapport building? Are you here or are you way over there? When people come to you as a coach, do they share whatever they need to share to get to where they need to go? Or are they hesitant? If they're hesitant, perhaps there's more we can do there. I'm not saying there is. For each of us, we have struggles in different areas. Presence. Do we really hear everything the person says? We're very often used to being an expert. And what an expert will do is say, I'll bet that's the solution. And then we hold that thought in our head. I'm doing that on purpose. I wasn't saying anything, right? So when we're holding that thought in our head, that's what it's like. We can't hear anything anymore. And when we think of the question to ask, it's the same thing. It's like the person's not even talking. Being present in that way is extremely hard. What it requires is to be like at the movie theater. When was the last time you took notes at the movie? Well, okay, you haven't been at the movie theater for a while, but when you have been, did you bring a notebook? Did you take notes? No. But afterwards, you can still describe the plot holes and the wonderful commentary and the jokes and everything. You still remember it because you're just absorbing. To just absorb, very hard to do. So rapport building, presence, focusing on the other person, letting the other person do most of the talking, 80-20%. Imagine doing that. You're only talking 20% of the time when you're coaching. Whew. It's hard to do. It takes training and practice. Leaving choices to the other person. So let's say somebody says, yada, 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 product owner, yada, 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 retrospective, yada, 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 project manager. So you're thinking, I think this is an issue with the product owner. And you say, tell me more about the product owner. You have just shared an opinion. Your opinion is that that's what we should talk about. Coaching would be, okay, so you mentioned the product owner, the retrospectives, and the project manager. Where would you like to focus? Leaving all choices and decisions to the coachee. And if actually the product owner is what's most important and they go there, great, you might say, I was right. But we don't actually know. And maybe the problem is the product owner, but the person's not ready to talk about that yet. And so if they talk about something else, that gives us some information. So we want to leave all choices to the coachee. It's hard to do. Notice this has really nothing to do with coaching techniques, right? This is just about who you are, letting the other person make the choices, letting the other person do most of the talking. That could be useful, for instance, when somebody comes to you and they say, hey, I just lost a friend, right? They just need somebody to listen. So they're everyday skills that we're just going to take from wherever they are way over here. A few more: emotional intelligence, pausing, and resisting thinking out loud. Resisting thinking out loud? What's that all about? Well, if we're trying to have the other person think through whatever's on their mind, we want them constantly thinking all the time. We're just there to basically nudge them in a direction that they'd like to go, trying not to get in the way. They might get off track. There's stuff we can do there, but we don't want to get in the way. And actually, if we think out loud, we've paused their thinking and they may lose their thought. Where was I going with that? I was acting that. I didn't lose my thought. But you've been in that place. You had this thought, brilliant thought, and then you didn't have a chance to follow it up and it's gone. I wish I could get it back. That's just how we work. So we want to make sure as when we're in the coaching mode that we allow the person to chase their thought wherever it's going to go. I'll show you what thinking out loud looks like. Please don't feel self-conscious if this is you. Just something to think about. Actually, I'll show you the opposite first, and I'll show you why it's so hard to resist thinking out loud. Okay, so let me think about it for a moment, and then I'll tell you my thought. Somewhere in there, you thought, is he going to start talking again? Did he get confused? Did he lose his train of thought? What's going on? This feels a little awkward. Yeah, that's why it's so hard to resist thinking out loud. When we're an expert, we're expected to have the answer like a magician. And so if we delay, people might think we're confused or we don't really know what we're doing. But over time, we can train them. That's expert. This is coach. Can't do it immediately. It takes time. Okay, so here's the opposite. All right, so you mentioned, I heard you talk about the Scrum Master and the retro, oh no, it was in the stand-up. So your stand-up went 30 minutes. So did I ask you if there was no, not the, okay, never mind. So when the project manager walked in at the retrospective, which was also connected, I believe, and you said that with COVID, with your situation at home, that it was very hard to get masks. But I was like, what? What's going on? So instead, if we take the time to think, we might say, it seems like there's a number of things going on here. What seems to be the thing that you're struggling with the most? That's super clear. Okay. So we took the time to think. And while we were thinking, the other person could keep thinking. So in fact, when they stop talking and we think, they might start up again. And that's wonderful, because that means they had more to say, more to think through. And we wanted to let that happen. All right. So here are some coaching techniques, which actually are also appropriate for everyday interactions. You might recognize them as just normal things to do. Acknowledging the other person, celebrating their wins, encouraging them, sharing your intuition. Intuition. Wow, that's not for today. Lightening things up a little bit when they get a little dark, letting people get it off their chest. You might think, whoa, that's going to take time. But you know what? If somebody has something on their chest and they can't think about the problem in front of them, then they need to get off that off their chest so that they can think about the problem in front of them. As experts, we're usually like, okay, I understand that that's an issue for you and whatever, but the problem here is how to split the user story. Yeah, I know you're kind of distressed. Anyway, so about this user story, right? We kind of focus in, we can focus in on the problem, but instead in coaching, the problem's not interesting. The person in front of us is what's interesting. How is it that the smart, capable, amazing person is struggling with this problem? Well, they came to us for expertise. Maybe, maybe not. And if there's a piece of expertise, maybe it's not, maybe this problem is not the actual problem. Maybe it's this problem. So we need to figure out what problem it is first. Then we can help them. And if we're going to share expertise, absolutely we'll do that. I'm not going to go through each of these. I'll just let you absorb them and think about them. I want you to think about the effort required to have none of these show up in a 1-hour interaction with somebody. And by the way, I'm not trying to make you feel guilty or self-conscious or awkward. We're all human. I run into these too. That's a long list. And getting all of these to be almost non-existent is super, super hard. But again, think of that person that you reach out to when you're stuck. You need somebody to talk to. Who do you reach out to? And you might need to reach out to multiple people. This person is good at really listening. This person is good at asking insightful questions. This person, whatever. Having all of the qualities that I mentioned earlier and none of these in the same person, wow. But that's the challenge of coaching. So I'm not here to introduce you to powerful questions, right? So please don't try to memorize this, and you guys can have the slides for reference. And powerful questions is not about memorizing questions. It's to be able to ask questions that hit all of these points. Now, I said that this was more about who you are than what you do. So how does powerful questions come in? Well, actually, we can use powerful questions in a non-coaching way. Right, so we can use them for coaching, but I just want to show you how much has nothing to do with coaching. So if we take all these characteristics and we remove 3 of them, action-oriented, future-facing, and thought-provoking, we can get what I like to call almost powerful questions. So if, when you're asking a person a question, it's based on what they just said, it's short, it's one topic, it's clear, and it's open, that's going to be a better conversation, just period. Now, the reason that I'm pointing these out is, imagine you interact with a stranger. I guess that doesn't happen all that often because we have like waiting rooms in our conversations, right? Can you imagine the real world, like somebody comes near you and they have to go through a waiting room, right? So it's it's a little unrealistic. But imagine back, or post-pandemic, which hopefully we'll get to soon, you bump into a stranger on the street and you strike up a conversation. And as part of that, you say, so I wonder, what would your future self say to you about that? That's probably not going to happen, right? So that would be a weird thing. And people are like, oh, I don't think I know you that well, right? But if we take these 3 things out, these are questions we can use for everyday conversations that will be even more supportive than anything else we might ask. right? So you're talking to a friend and they're thinking of selling their house. You might think to ask, is it the price that bothers you? Is it the neighborhood? But these are all leading questions. We could ask instead, you've been thinking about this for a while. What is the main thing you need to figure out? That's helpful. And it really isn't necessarily a coaching question. It's just a helpful question that you might ask with all of the leading parts taken out. Here are the behaviors that are specific to coaching, and you'll notice it's a very short list. So in addition to more supportive and less diminishing, then there's some specific things in coaching as well, but it really is a short list. Asking the purpose of a conversation, you might think, how is that to do? So one of the things we want to do with coaching is figure out, what is our goal? Just like what is our sprint goal, right? People come to us to talk to us about stuff. They want to talk about the whole release. I got this big goal, but we want to narrow it down just like in a sprint. So if we're going to have a short conversation, we want to know what is the outcome of that, like acceptance criteria. But you wouldn't do that in a normal conversation. Imagine you're out, to lunch with somebody you've just met, and it's, sort of casual, conversational. You say, okay, what would you like to accomplish in our conversation today? That'd be kind of odd, be off-putting. Like, I don't know, like just hanging out, right? So there are things that we would only do when we have permission from a person to coach. Sharing observations about what's coming up in the conversation, questions intended to raise awareness, powerful questions, basically. Asking for next steps, encouraging learning and growth, and inquiring about accountability. Oh, what might you need to do to make sure you accomplish this? Who are you to ask me that? Right. So in a coaching conversation, if it's acknowledged that you're the person's coach, absolutely. So outside of this small list of specific things that we do in coaching, everything else is about who you are. I'm not saying that in a conversation, you always have to make it the other person the focus. But as a person, that's something that you can practice anywhere. Okay. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. Just very briefly, to give you some ideas and thoughts about how coaching might be different than perhaps you'd expected, and also how it's so much about who you are rather than what you do. And with that, I'll send it off to questions.
You're welcome to either type your questions in the chat or unmute yourself and ask directly.
I see a hand up from, yeah.
I have a bit of a weird question, Damon. Are you going to be recording your own audiobook? I was reading your book actually on the flight over here, so I'm about halfway through, and actually it would be so much more impactful going through it a second time with you speaking through it.
Well, thank you. I'll give you my publisher's email, and you can lob that request over there. So interestingly, you may have heard of Lisa Adkins. Oh, well, that was another thing I was going to mention. So so our book is about professional coaching, specifically the kinds of stuff that we were just talking about. You notice I didn't use the word agile a single time except to say how easy it was. Yeah, it's easy to learn about, but doing it is another thing. So Lisa's book would be sort of a prelude to reading, or a precursor to reading our book, because it goes a deep dive into professional coaching, not so much agile. All the examples are about agile, but it's a deep dive in professional coaching. So Lisa Adkins, you may have noticed her, she was sort of journaling her work towards recording her book on LinkedIn. And when we were talking to our publisher, we said, oh, what about the audiobook? And they said, we don't do audiobooks. And we said, you've heard of Lisa Adkins, right? And then they said, oh, yes, that's the trial. So Lisa was their first audiobook. I just noticed that most of Bob Martin's books are now audio. And so if the book, continues to do well, then we'll likely do an audio recording. So thank you for that vote of confidence. I appreciate it. Really, anything that's on your mind, I would love to hear. I know you're all thinking something. I would just love to hear what it is, even if it's Brussels sprouts. I'm sure whatever it is related to our conversation.
So Damon, there's a comment in the chat here that says your voice is so soothing and creates safety, and I can completely agree. I think you should also do a whole lot of mindfulness meditations as well. I'd gladly listen to like a sleep story or something. Would be amazing.
Okay. I'll consider that. Well, thanks very much.
Charlotte, would you like me to read out your question? A minute. Okay, there is a question here for you, Damon, from Charlotte. How do you suggest we start if we are a new coach? What would be the main aspect do you think would have the biggest impact that we could start with?
Wow. Does anybody have a smaller question? I think I'm going to have to give you a consulting answer to that. It depends. I'll give you some advice. I know you didn't ask for this advice, but I'll give you some advice first, which is we as coaches, as agile coaches, really only need to know a little bit more than they do. Right. So I don't know that there's a particular place to start, but when you're working with people, you need some agile knowledge, some coaching knowledge is useful. But it really depends on the situation. If you're looking to go into a situation where they're very experienced in agile, okay, we're going to be a little bit further along, but it really depends. If it's if the question is along the lines of a first job as Scrum Master or coach, that's actually super hard to get. The number one way to get that is to be there when people say, who would like to be a Scrum Master or coach? That's the number one way to do it. I don't know that you can, you can really set yourself up for that. Short of that, anything you can do to get something on your resume that is in that area. I was a project manager involved in an agile endeavor. I was a manager of an agile, in an agile endeavor. So those are all good things. But as far as learning about coaching, this may sound a little self-serving, but I'll let you know, we get like $2 per book. But the alternative to reading a book like this, whether it's our book or Coactive Coaching, which is the book I used to recommend as number one. So now it's number two. For like $20 to $30, you're getting the Coactive course is like $15,000, and they don't hold back in the book. They'll give you, everything you can imagine, top to bottom, left to right about coaching. And it's just that it's only 6 hours, right? So that you can only go so deep. And it's the same with our book, right? We're not trying to sell you on anything. So it's a really great way to get a lot of knowledge. There's also practice exercises. Yeah, so that's what I would say. The other thing is you might start with Lisa's book because it's a good combination of expertise and a dip your toe into professional coaching.
Charlotte, if there's anything more you'd like to ask on that, just pop it in the chat and we'll ask Damon.
I'll be brave and ask a question. Sorry, I did drop for part of the session. I got called into an emergency, so sorry if it was covered in there. But just I love the session and love the title, and I find like I put so much of myself worth on being busy and getting things done, and it's the timing of this is quite interesting in because I'm trying to shift my sense of value from what I do to who I am and the space that I can hold for others to collaborate, to communicate. But I find it so hard because I'm attached to needing to put out value, to get stuff done, to like have that. Is there any tips or direction that you could give for that journey of trying to shift your sense of self-worth?
Yeah. So rather than invest in hours and hours of practicing and intention and hard work and introspection, I recommend, actually, I don't have anything. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of hard work practice. Your intention is probably the most important thing. And it sounds like you have that intention. And I like how you mentioned the shift in value perception. I can't tell you how many times I've done a coaching demo and people have said, but what did you do? What was the value you provided? So, yeah, did you hear them say thank you at the end? Did you see the expression on their face? Yeah, but you didn't do that. They did that. Yeah, I get that. But how do you suppose they got there that fast? I don't know. Wah! Right. So it's very hard for coachees to see the value that we provide. And it can be very hard for us to see the value that we provide because we're not used to that. We're used to, you solved the puzzle. You took the Rubik's Cube and you said, there you go. And people are like, that's amazing. So people have an expectation that we're magicians. And so we put the expectation on ourselves that we're magicians. But I'm sad to tell you, we're not magicians. You know what can happen is we give people an answer. That doesn't mean it's the answer. They go back and try it. And guess what? It doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? They haven't done it before. So there's something, I can't do this with all of you and I don't have enough adjectives, but imagine I did it with all of you, that I went and I said, Angie, you're marvelous. And Taryn, you're incredible. Gisela, supercalifragilistic. And I did that for each and every one of you. And I would mean it. And what I would be describing is your agile expertise. And that is a blind spot for you. It's a blind spot for you because, oh, yes. Don't you think he's right? Uh-huh. Oh, right. It's my friend Joe. He's incredible, isn't he? That's a little weird and awkward. You can't see Joe, can you? Because you're so amazing at Agile, you can literally see things that other people can't see. And so when you talk about them and how to do it and everything, they're not really sure what you're talking about. They can't see it. So when we give people an answer, they may not know how to carry it out. And so they do it wrong or they do it differently, right? So we need to find a way to help them find what's going to work for them in their situation, something that they can move forward. And that's actually really hard. My favorite example of this going wrong, wasn't my intention, was doing a presentation and then a year later doing another presentation and somebody from the first presentation showing up, raising their hand in the first 5 minutes and saying they had a question. I was like, oh, wow, that's amazing. A question in the first 5 minutes. And the person said, yes, I took your advice last year. It turned into a disaster. Our Kanban implementation didn't go well at all. What are your thoughts? I was like, oh, gee, thanks. Right. So we very often are put in the place of being magicians, and we need to remember that actually we're not, and that's very hard. Hopefully that answers the original question. If not, please feel free to follow up.
That's great. Thanks, Damon.
Damon, if I may ask a question, they say no question is stupid, so I'm going to ask it anyway.
Well, we've had a weird question, so it's about time for one of those.
Okay, great. So what would you say is the difference between facilitation and coaching? And how do you, if you're in a scenario, can you facilitate and coach in one session?
There's no difference. There's two differences, but basically there's no differences. When you think of, I love to say this, when you think of coaching, think of facilitation, right? You give no advice, no expertise, no opinion, you don't lead anywhere. But there are actually two teeny tiny little differences. There's more in coaching, but everything in facilitation is also coaching. The two differences are you have a specific end goal and you have an agenda, right? But if somebody comes to you for coaching, they say, okay, so I'd like to, oh no, I got it. Here's the agenda. First 5 minutes, we're going to talk about this problem that I've noticed that you have. The next 10 minutes, you're going to brainstorm. After that, we'll prioritize. Ooh, who is this person, right? So that's really the only two differences, I would say.
So would it be worth that's really great to hear. Thank you for that. So starting off to almost rather practice or get skill in facilitation and then build up to coaching is one of the others. So if you wanted to be better at facilitation and coaching, do you sort of how do you tackle both in terms of learning or experience or reading and knowledge? Is it a combination of all of them?
I think you just answered your. Yeah. Sounds like a plan. I love it. No further answers on that.
I don't have a question. I've got just a comment because Taryn had me thinking. So just to everyone else, Damon hasn't paid for my review on this book at all. But one of the things I actually really like with the structure, the way you've structured the book, is that connection between here's a topic that we're going to talk about, and then you relate it into what if you're an agile coach or just a coach or someone in an agile realm. I like the way that you relate it to what if you're not a coach, what if you're a manager who's coaching someone below you, and then also what happens if you're doing it not one-on-one but in a group as well. So like so far every like chapter that I've read has been structured with that kind of thing, and it stood out for me quite a lot because I had to reflect quite a lot on that, and I was like, it's quite nicely structured, especially with Taryn's question as well.
Thanks. Yeah. So professional coaching has traditionally been aimed at individuals. And one of the wonderful things that Lisa did for all of us, and we definitely stand on her shoulders, is she showed how you could use skills from professional coaching in a team environment and within an organizational environment. And so we try to follow that pattern of, okay, here's the idea. How do you use it with an individual? How do you use it with a team? How do you use it with an organization? Because we're probably not going to create private practices and have people come and visit us that we don't work next to, right? We're working next to people on a regular basis, and so it's a different environment. Thanks for mentioning that. What else? And really, anything on your mind. It doesn't have to be a question. It doesn't have to be profound. I think it would be interesting just to hear what's on people's minds. So there's, I've done a scientific study on this with thousands and thousands of people. So I'll give you the data on the percentage of people that are looking for coaching. And I'm going to give it to you in a very precise number, right? To multiple decimal points. The number of people that are looking for coaching when they come to you as a coach is 0.0000000. So that's your starting place. So I would say this other Kathy, don't put her on the shelf yet. I would start with her. And what you're going to do is you're going to put your coachees through what I like to call coachee training. Just don't tell them that, right? So, but step one is actually you. Nobody really notices about this until maybe after I've said this, maybe you'll notice it. The number one person that asks you for advice is you. You will most likely offer advice, expertise, and opinion way before it's asked for. Even when somebody says to you, I've come to you for advice, don't believe them. It may be that they want your rubber stamp, right? They just want you to listen and then nod your head and say, that is brilliant. And it may be brilliant, it may not be, but until they actually explicitly ask you, even in a cute little voice, you want to resist your own inner urge to provide that. And if they ask for advice, you can certainly acknowledge it and say something like, you're like, oh, they asked, okay, so coaching, whatever. You can say something like, well, I'm not in your shoes, and I don't even know the names of the people on your team or whatever to show them. Actually, I'm really not in your shoes. If I have some things to share with you, I will be happy to. But before that, let's explore a little. And so then they're going to go, okay. So if we get to the point where you have some advice for me, you will give it. You're not going to be one of these, how do you feel? Okay, yep. What would you do? Kind of coaches, which I'm not saying that's what coaching is, but sometimes that's what people think. There's a list of about 5 or 6 things that you can do, and that's it. That's one of them. Resist first. Just very quickly, the others are educating, right? So you go to a restaurant. I love this example. You go to a restaurant and they seat you. All these examples from the future. Yes, the future. When we go to a restaurant again, they go to seat you and they didn't hand you a menu. And you sit down and there's no menus on the table. And it's not a restaurant with the menus on the wall. They must have forgot. So then the server comes up and you say, oh, we'd like some menus. And they say, oh, yeah, we don't have menus, but we're a restaurant. What would you like? I don't know. What do you have? Food. How about a cheeseburger? No, we don't serve that. How frustrating would that be? It's the same thing with coaching. Okay, how can I help? I don't know. What can you do? Right? So people don't actually understand what coaching is. So we need to educate them. We can do demos. We can send them white papers. And we can do things called coaching agreements. So so for instance, my simplest coaching agreement is, hi, I'm Damon. I can do some coaching with you. And where I lean is pure coaching, not sharing expertise. I like to discuss first. But if you'd like expertise from me, feel free to ask. In other words, our agreement is, I'm not going to tell you anything unless you ask. Okay, I guess we're there.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Damon. That was great. Your storytelling was superb as well. That was fun and interesting and funny and thought-provoking, and I think many aha moments. What we will do, with everyone's permission, we have recorded this. We will edit it to make sure that only Damon, if you don't mind, are reflected, and ourselves from Think Agile, and we'll send this recording out to the people that have attended. And please do go and order Damon's book as well. It sounds like a superb read. And you can contact, if you will also, Damon, put your contact details when we send the link of the video, so if you want to get hold of him. But thank you again for everyone being here, and thank you, Damon. That was really, really great. The feedback, looking at the chats now, everyone's saying great session, thank you. That was very insightful. So I know it was really appreciated. And please keep on following Think Agile Neighborhood for the next meetup. It's going to be an exciting topic. So thank you. Have a lovely evening and be safe.
Bye-bye.